Okay, perfect. Do I say got it?
No. Welcome
Okay.
back to welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where we let the inner warrior shine in their light. Today, I have a good friend of mine, Danielle Simpson. Danielle is a real estate professional. She's been in the business for quite a long time. But more than that, we both hate labels, and she's just an overall good human being. But welcome to the show, Danielle. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks for having me, Daryl. I'm just so excited to talk to you finally. So
Yeah, you and I have played a lot of calendar tag to try to get you on the docket. I think we've been trying for over a year to get your story out.
yeah.
What I do know is that you do have a great story, and your story isn't one of all sunshine and roses, which is kind of nice because you, I feel, are sunshine and roses. You're always bubbly, always happy, always, got a good heart and willing to share. So I'm just excited to talk to you tonight, and I appreciate that you finally are here. So thank you.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, your life wasn't always sunshine and roses. You grew up as a single child, but you had some of your trials and hardships as well. I know that you were really close to your mother, but was your life as a youth what we would consider normal, or did you have a lot of things that you had to overcome along the way?
Oh gosh, I think I kind of grew up in the childhood that I think anyone would want. My parents had me at 36 years of age. So they were kind of already into their careers. With that, I was quite spoiled. Went to the best schools. My dad was an alcoholic until the day that I moved out at the age of 17 and a half. That day he quit drinking, and he's never drank since.
So he drank while you were in the house, but after you were in, some people would say, my daughter is causing me to drink, and he's gone.
And that's kind of like part of the joke.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I drove him to
Yeah, maybe my child drove me to drink all those years, right?
they should have got, I probably played both parts because I was a daddy's girl and a mommy's girl. So
Oh.
I went to daddy for sports, and I went to mom for the other things. And if I got a speeding ticket, I went to dad because I was like, Dad will fix this.
Yeah.
If it was something of heartbreak, I went to mom. And so, no, I actually had a really good childhood. I think because of the fact that I had a really good childhood, I trusted everyone. I trusted everyone's word.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone told me I'm a good person, I would go, oh, okay, you're a good person.
Yeah.
And not think about the fact that maybe they don't have the best intentions for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just now into my later 30s, and I'm figuring out not everyone has the best intentions for you. And that's not always a bad thing. You just need to be able to weed them out.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we turn on the camera. Just because your heart is one way doesn't mean everybody's heart is that same way, and that does come back to bite us sometimes.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, and I know you went to a private school and you had a really good education, but even that had to be filled with some people who didn't have your best interest at heart.
It did. I was really lucky. If there was an issue in school, which there usually wasn't, because generally you couldn't work really in high school. In the high school I went to, you would start at 7:15 in the morning. It was in Spangle, Washington. I would drive 45 minutes to school because my parents didn't believe in boarding because they thought it was brainwashing in the high school. So they were like, we want you to have the education, just not be there 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually I'm still very close friends with most of my friends from high school,
Nice.
Very close. And so and with a couple of the pastors too.
Okay.
It was a Seventh-day Adventist school.
Okay.
I'm not Seventh-day Adventist, and they fully accepted that.
Nice.
Which I found amazing with the Seventh-day Adventist community. because none of them really ever judged me for not choosing, because we had to have Bible class every day. I mean, that was
Mhm.
a commitment, a priority, all this other stuff. We did a lot of community service, different things like that. So no, my childhood was wonderful. It was when I started to go into the real world,
Mhm.
and I wasn't surrounded by people who did have those best interests, because I was just used to that. I mean,
Right.
the I never dated in high school ever. Um, those boys I grew up with, they were like brothers to me, like all of them. So when I got into the dating world, I was like, oh, you you're gonna be just like this person. No, that's not the case. There's just not, you're not going to be with people that you were surrounded by for 12, 13, 14 years of your life, in high school and in college. And so when I started meeting people, I couldn't understand the fact that someone might not be telling the truth.
Mhm.
Because my mom always used to say I had crocodile tears, and she would be like, if you even had the smallest white lie, you would come clean within 5 minutes, and just the tears would be rolling down your face. So I
I want
can't
to play poker with you.
yeah, no, you never do. I'm horrible at it.
Yeah.
Horrible. And so no, I feel like I had a wonderful childhood. Other than the fact that my dad was a big drinker in the later years, he went through a lot of abuse as a child that came out later in my life that I didn't know about. And it was horrific. I wouldn't wish this upon any, the abuse that he went through as a child. And he hid it from me to probably protect me. And drinking was his coping mechanism.
That's
When I
pretty
moved out,
amazing though. That's because most people who have been abused as children grow up to abuse others or their own children if they didn't go get help from it. And the fact that
well,
your dad could hide all that, it's
we
pretty
had
amazing.
our moments, but nothing that would be like abusive. Like it was more just I was so sheltered that I was like, oh, like prima donna, like not dealing with that. And, but no, it did get to a point at that 17 and a half year age where that was probably his rock bottom, right? Like his rock bottom. And I looked at my mom and I said, you can deal with this, but I will not. I
Mm.
moved out 17 and a half. And then the pastor called me in from my private school and he said, are you living by yourself? And I was like, well, kind of. I'm living in a condo that they own. So not really, but whatever. Like I just go to school. Like that's what I do. But no, he's never drank a drop since the day that I moved out.
That's
He
a
never did
great testament to your,
AA. He never did.
he
Yeah.
just flipped a switch and said, no,
Yeah. Cold turkey.
nice.
Cold turkey. Just I don't know
That's,
how someone does that, but he did it and he did it well. And then for probably about a year, I didn't talk to him because I just didn't know if it was going to, move forward with that. And then
mhm.
I felt really bad. I was like, okay. Like then I got pregnant with my son a few years later. I got married essentially really young because I wanted to start my own family. And that was with the horribly wrong person. He was a felon.
Okay, so how do you go from this private school, this goody goody life,
I know.
out on your own, and then you're dating a felon?
So my parents owned a real estate brokerage, a very successful one in Spokane, Washington, one of the most successful real estate brokerages. And I was like, well, I'm going to get my real estate license. Like, why wouldn't I? And so they said, well, we will not let you work in our brokerage unless you work in title and escrow first. So I was like, fine. So I did. I went and I worked for a title and escrow company in Spokane. And I did that for a year, learned everything about title and escrow, got my license, and then they had confidence in me, so they would let me sign in on their brokerage, because I could have gone to other brokerages, but I didn't want to do that. That would be dumb. They owned it.
Right.
And so I did that. And then one of my mom's clients referred someone to her, and that was my ex-husband. And well, he wouldn't leave me alone in the title escrow part. So I said, my mom actually thought he was a really nice guy, and he was a really nice guy at first. He was. And she knew about the whole him being in prison. So embarrassing. Knew about him being in prison for like 4 years. He had just gotten out. He had inherited this house. He of course spent all the money like immediately, because he was a young kid. And we ended up getting married. I think I was 18 and a half, and he was like 22.
Were you
And
pregnant and then got married, or married and then
no, I didn't get pregnant for another 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I had bought 2 homes by myself at that point before I got by myself. I actually was pretty careful about that. Then when my son was about 2.5, 3, things started to go downhill. I had left him a couple times at this point, and then it just kind of came. I was young, like, you think you're in love and this and that. You have a little baby, you're trying to make things work. My parents had gone through their hardships, but they worked through them. So that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I was like, we'll get through this. We'll make it through. And then you get to a point where you go, maybe it's time to just cut your losses.
Was he
And so
ever abusive?
Yes.
Physically or just verbally?
Both.
Okay. So how long did the physical?
That was more the last year.
Okay.
The physical was the last year.
So you came from this bubble of goodness.
Yeah.
And you went into this world of reality where not everyone was like your bubble. You got into your relationship, and then he became verbally and physically abusive, which had to be a shock to you because you didn't grow up in that environment, in that world. So that had to be like a shock in and of itself.
I just thought there was something I was doing wrong.
You thought it was you?
Yeah, 100%. Because I didn't understand where it was coming from. Like, even though he had his past, I'm thinking, well, this is a guy with like a really bad past. Why is he so angry at me? So there must be something that I'm doing wrong to upset him.
And I know that you had a closeness with your parents.
Very.
So how did they not see it? Or if they did, how did they not get you out of it?
I think they tried several times. So there was one time, I think that this was before I had my son, and I was like 21 years old, and I called my dad and I was like, I'm kicking him out. My dad was there with a truck and like 4 guys. Like, okay, we're ready to go. Well, then of course we would end up back together, and my dad would just shake his head. Oh, and he worked for my dad too. My dad owned a huge construction company, and my dad hired him to be like the project manager, I guess you would kind of say, in that area. So it wasn't until one night when my son was like 4. So we had been together for about, he was 4.5, so like 7.5 years at that point. It was New Year's Eve, and he just flipped, and I was like, I don't really feel like going out. Like, Charlie doesn't feel well. Like, I don't really feel like going out, this and that. And he just lost his mind. And I was like, we're parents. Like, we don't get to just go out and do these things till 2:00 in the morning anymore. And I was totally fine with that, just because I never grew up with that. And my dad, for some reason, I don't know what was going on, but my dad called me, and he could hear everything happening in the background. And he said, I will be there in 5 minutes. And he was. And he grabbed my son and he said, he literally pointed at me and he said, when you figure this out, you come to our house, but I'm taking my grandson because he will not see or hear any of this. And that's when it like clicked.
Mm.
And I went, uh-oh, my kid is seeing and hearing all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not processing that. So that's what happened. And then, I filed for divorce and all that. And then about a year after, he looked at me and said, our son looks just like you, and I can't stand looking at him. So will you, I want to give up my rights.
Wow.
And I said, okay. I said, no, I was fine with it. I said, if that's how you truly feel, I don't want someone like that in my child's life. So I said, yeah, like, why?
Well, the reason I cringe is because I've raised children that are not mine. I don't have any biologically children, but I have a daughter who is mine since she was 2. She will always be mine
Absolutely.
from them.
Your dad.
My son is not mine, obviously. But he is
that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And so I cringe when I hear people who can say that, because I've raised children that are not mine, but I've loved them as they are mine, and I still do to this day. So when I hear someone who is just willing to walk away, it just that's such a foreign concept to me. I know it happened. I know I'm aware of it. It makes me cringe.
It is crazy. I mean, I hate to say it, but I was happy about it because for probably the last 6 visitations, he didn't show up, and Charlie would be waiting on the front porch, just and I'm like, I am not going to have my child grow up this way. So in the state of Washington, this is actually, if you want to cringe, but it's a funny cringe. When he decided to give up his rights, I sold my 2 homes, gave him all the money, except for a very minimal amount. And they were mine that I purchased by myself and took care of by myself. And that's why I decided to move to Arizona. And, in order for someone to give up their rights in the state of Washington, someone has to take over, whether it be the mother or father. So obviously someone had to take over the father's side. So my dad did. So the birth certificate shows me as the mom and my dad as the dad.
The state of Washington makes somebody else be on the document?
Because if something were to happen to me, he would become a ward of the state.
Wow.
So
I can see that in Arkansas, but
so funny, because when we first moved to Fountain, I know. So we were just used to it because all of our friends and family knew, it was just a thing. It wasn't a big deal. So when we moved to Arizona and we moved to Fountain Hills, we go to the school and we're not thinking anything about it, right? We give them the birth certificate, we give them the shot records, we give them the blah, blah, blah. And my dad is Dan and I'm Danielle, and Charlie looks just like me and just like my dad. And they're and my parents had me at 36. So he's a much older man. And they're looking at us and I'm like, why are they looking at us weird? I'm like, oh, you think, and we have the same last name.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you think we're, so I'm just dying. I'm like, no, that's my dad, which equals Pa. He's Pa.
Yeah.
And I'm the mom. And and they're like, oh, thank God. And I'm like, listen, I grew up close to the Idaho border, but not that close. Okay. Gosh. So it's now everyone in the school system knows, because Fountain Hills is so small. So they all know.
Yeah.
But
it becomes a case where you have to prove that your family tree forks.
Right. And now everyone just kind of knows. And then, so I'm very close with a lot of people in Fountain Hills. I have, my mom became kind of a pillar. You met my mom in Fountain Hills. That's how you met. You had a listing in Fountain Hills.
Yeah.
I think right next to hers.
Yeah.
And, then I met who I was with for over 4 years, and it was just horrible experience. I'm like, okay, now there's two. Like, now there's two. Like, can I be burnt more? So,
And the second one was totally a narcissist too, right?
I don't know if the first one was. I think he was just young, confused, and had bad influences. When I look back at things like that, like, yeah, he was abusive, but it was like, I don't think he knew what he was doing. We were young. We were both very young. This last one, much older than me, much older. He knew what he was doing. He knew my background. He almost studied up on it so that he knew what to say or do in order to get me in a place of just being, submissive almost, or slightly scared, but without me being able to say that. So there's definitely a big difference between the two.
But the abuse is the abuse, and you still
Yeah.
feel like it's your fault, and you still feel like it's, something you've done to cause it or create it. And so the results are similar.
The results are similar. In this last one, I kind of figured out like it's not me. Like, but at the same time, I do take accountability because I let this go forward and forward and forward. And I went back and back and back several times. I take accountability, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect, because I'm definitely not in any way. But there are just certain things that with this last one are horrifically worse than the first one. Horrific.
So, and again, you're coming from this bubble of not experiencing the other
Life.
side of human nature.
Yeah.
And at one point you said that you felt like you were losing your mind. So
I did. I really did. I thought I was.
Yeah, so that's still an abuse that you victimize or put yourself as like, oh, I'm losing my mind, this can't be real, it's got to be me. So
I 100% thought it was me with what he would say to me if I brought up anything, at all. Like, oh, well, I brought up that, you got really drunk the night before and you lost your mind. I didn't get any sleep the night before, and now you haven't spoken to me in 2 days. Well, it's your fault. I just want to let you know it's your fault. And I'm like, well, if it is, can you tell me what I did so that I can fix it? And then he would say, I don't have time for this. But then like the next day, he would buy me like a purse or something. So then I'm like, okay, well, maybe he realizes like he was a little harsh on me, and maybe he'll talk to me about it in a couple days. But I don't care about material things. I can buy that for myself.
But again, you had this happen in a different way with your first husband.
Yes.
So how your parents must have been like shaking their head going, WTF, like, how are you back in this situation?
Yeah, like probably in the second one, when we moved in together, my parents were not thrilled about that. His family was really weird too. Like they were just really weird. I don't really know how to even describe it. Like they were just kind of off. And things would happen where I would go to work, and this was when I was in like managing restaurants for like a 2-year period. I would come home because it would be like Mardi Gras or something, right? Like you get off late, really work, and all my things would be on the front porch. And I would be like, and I'm not used to that. I'm used to owning everything, but I never did anything like that. So then I'm thinking, what the heck? So then he'd wake up the next day and be like, I just got really drunk, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should like, but I didn't have time. I didn't have time to process it. I was working 60 hours a week.
Mm.
Like I would just kind of go with the flow and then he would apologize later. So he was really good at that. Like it was confusing. It would be like 1 second and it's your fault, and the next second it would be an apology. So this was like a different, where the one before, he would stick with his guns. Like he stuck with it. He was like, nope, like I'm pissed. And I actually respect that more.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
then it's like,
how do you awaken to the fact that, oh my God, this is again an abuse that I'm enduring?
it took my mom dying.
So let's explore that for a minute, because I know that you were really close to both your parents,
Yep.
mom's girl, daddy's girl, and
Yep.
your mom died last year.
Almost.
So how does that become your awakening?
For me personally, I think I just always knew that I had my mom to come home to and hug. And when I knew that I was no longer going to be something that I would ever have again, I knew I had to make some really tough decisions about how I deal with things in life. And one of those things were who I let into my life. And I made some really strong cuts, and they were good. Like literally the day, and I don't know if people believe about stuff like this, but if anyone could do it, my mom could. The day I decided to leave, every fire alarm in the house went off. The sprinklers started to go off. There was nothing happening, like nothing. It just, lights were flickering, and I was like, oh my God. And I remember just like laughing because I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, Mom, if you could wait to do this stuff like after I get out of the house, I would really appreciate it. And ever since I left that person and just went on my like believing in myself and becoming who I know my mom would want me to believe who I am, and actually just believing who I am is who I am, things have been a lot better. Like everything's better.
It's interesting because, I was close to my dad. He died over 4 years ago. And it's interesting when we take away our safety net.
Yeah, like our security blanket.
Yeah, when we're forced by life to finally stand up on our own, and it doesn't matter our age.
Yeah.
We're 5 or 15 or 25 or 65, it doesn't matter. When
Absolutely.
we finally have to stand on our own because that safety net is no longer there, we do look at life with a different lens and with a more realistic view, because it seems like you were in this bubble for 30 plus years,
It was.
and la 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 la, mom and dad will
Yeah.
take care of it, no worries,
Yep. I
and
mean,
then it's
I was
gone.
extremely independent, but at the same time, I knew that I could, talk to my mom. I used to talk to her 10 times a day. And it
Mhm.
wasn't like an unhealthy thing. Like it was just, I mean, she was a realtor for 42 years. So we always had deals going together, and she was my confidant. She was my everything. So then when she passed away and I looked at this person next to me, and what changed everything was it was one day, and he literally looked at me. I was getting ready for work. It was like 5 days after my mom passed away. And I wasn't going to work because I had to. Love my boss. He would never have me do that. But I just kind of felt like I needed to,
Sure.
just to kind of,
Yeah.
have some normalcy.
Right.
Um, he looked at me and I was just starting to cry a little bit. And he said, "Don't cry today. There's been enough of your crying."
Ooh.
And I was like, that's when I knew, like, no, you're not anyone that I could ever rely on for anything. And yes, I was in this, but I will fully admit, I was kind of, held like a little baby by
Mm-hmm.
mom for years, not financially or anything like that, but emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't getting fulfillment from him. I was getting fulfillment from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And once that stopped, I knew he could never be anything that I could ever depend or rely on for anything ever. And that's when I decided to leave.
And when we take ourselves out of that and we put ourselves into the reality of, oh shit, something's really messed up. I mean, that's a trauma and that's a scar. That's a hurt,
Mhm.
that's a pain. We can either brush it aside and, okay, that's just something that happened, or we can go and figure out why it happened, how
Yeah.
can I repair the brokenness, and how do I move on without being broken by it anymore. So which path did you choose?
Well, it was really interesting because I just thought she was talking nonsense. But when she was on her deathbed, she said, "If you leave him, I will send you someone new." And I'm like, I'm not going to even think about anything like that because I'm not someone who moves on very quickly. I don't bounce from one relationship to another. I was on a 5-year single streak from this one from my ex-husband to this one. Like, it's
Mhm.
not like I just went from one to the other. And my now current boyfriend, who is just amazing. Like, I'm so close with his parents. He's his whole family, his niece, nephew, everyone I'm close with. I talk to all of them every single day. They are there for me constantly. And I truly do believe that there is something to be said about, I think my mom sent him to me. I know that sounds weird, but she said she was going to, and he pops up and, like, I mean, we've never even had a tip and we've been together for like 8 months.
Well, you had to do some healing before she could do that, because
Yeah.
you got to clear the runway before a new plane can land.
I think I already kind of started because I think I knew the relationship was over before it actually ended. So I was at probably like the last like 7 or 8 months just trying to find a way out and finding out, like, I wasn't invested
Mhm.
anymore. So that relationship for me was personally done, especially with the way he continued on.
Mhm.
So it was like, okay, now you're just kind of like digging and digging and digging. And I just need to figure out how to, cut ties. So no, but I definitely had to do healing. I went into hermit mode for 2 months.
Mhm.
I didn't talk to anyone, do anything. Actually more like 4 months. In fact, when I started seeing my boyfriend, I told him, I said, "I am in no way prepared for a relationship. You probably do not want to date me." And he was like, "What?" And I said, "No, you really don't. You do not want to date me. I have a lot of history. I have a child. You do not." He's actually 5 months younger than me. So
Mhm.
I went from seeing guys who were like 12 to 15 years older than me to now. So that's weird for me, but it's the most successful relationship I've had thus far in my life. We go to church and church isn't for everyone. So I'm not trying to push church. But we do have a great church if anyone wants to know. It's evangelical, so it's like totally like kind of non-denominational. But we go to church like 3 times a month. That really actually helps when you, for me, it has helped me to go with him to church and just kind of have that support. And I'm still healing. I'm not done. I don't care about that last person anymore. But like you said, the scar is there,
Mhm.
and I'm going to make the scar pretty
There you go.
and thrive from it.
So if my math is semi good, your son is approaching teen years.
He'll be 15 in August. He's a
Yeah.
black belt in Taekwondo.
Yeah. So old enough to have seen all of this. And I know as a son, if I see this stuff happening to my mother, what happens to my rage level. How has your son been through this transition?
Um, he just said, Mom, it took you a really long time to find someone to treat you right, but that's okay. And, I always, no offense to the people I've been with before, or even the person I'm with now, but he will always be my main focus. So I made sure that he didn't really know or see any of these things happening. I'm sure he kind of knew,
I can assure you he did.
I can assure you he did too. And honestly, like he's so, I don't know how I don't know if it's like the Taekwondo and jujitsu that I've had him in for the last 8.5 years. And he has a black belt now. And just the different things that I've put him in, he's so strong, so independent, yet the best son ever. I'll
Mhm.
get home from the grocery store and he's in the parking lot grabbing all the groceries. He's opening the door. He's doing laundry. He's, Mom, I know you don't get home till tonight at this time. I put you forgot to put your laundry in the dryer. He's going to make the best husband, the best husband. And I will make darn sure that no woman treats him the way that I've been treated, because he
Well,
deserves the
the
best.
taekwondo and the jiu-jitsu, yeah, they're martial arts and whatever, but
Yep.
they're a martial art of the mind first and foremost.
Obedience and
So, his mind got the education and the fortitude long before he got his black belt.
yep.
And that's probably what helped, you know, be the son that he is to you today, because his mind was fortified to be strong through it all first. And
He's amazing.
so,
Move out of the sun.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Sun's getting there.
Yeah, it happens in Arizona.
Yeah.
The transformation from where you were, the passing of your mother, how did that affect your father?
Oh man. Um, he's still dealing. They were best friends. Best friends. They owned a brokerage together. They worked together. This was like the power couple,
Mhm.
right? One person did really well with this and the other person did really well with that. And together they just made the best team. That's what I always saw for myself. That's, I think, what I was always striving for, with every relationship that I was ever in. And now I finally seem to hopefully be having it. It's worked out really well so far. Um, but no, he's not dealing with it well. He's not dealing with it well. And I really had to have a strong look at myself, because I'll never forget what my aunt said to me. Because one day I was so upset with him. This was probably like 3 months after Mom had passed. I don't remember what the argument was about. And my aunt told me, Danielle, he's 72. He doesn't get to just start over. You do. So you need to give him a break and just remember that. And my eyes just kind of opened and I was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. I need to have so much patience with my father right now. I need to be his rock when he needs it and give him his space when he needs it. He's doing a lot better now, especially now that, I've gotten my real estate license in Arizona.
Mhm.
So he's doing it because I think now he feels like he's part of like, it's like, oh, now we have like our Simpson team again, kind of thing going on. But he has his moments. And I have gotten better at just kind of like, if he has a moment, Danielle, ignore that. Whatever he just said, and I don't mean like just general speaking, like if he says something like kind of like out of tune, like kind of mean or something,
Yeah.
don't react to that. He's just sad. He's lonely. He's lost his best friend and the love of his life.
Well, you need to, and I don't mean to tell you what you need to do, but
No, I love advice. so, give, so, so give me all you got.
we should all over ourselves. So I don't want to should you to death, but it feels like he needs that same grace that your ex didn't give you when he told you no more tears today. And it feels like he needs that same compassion you were looking for on that day.
That's such a good point, Daryl. That's such a good point. And that's kind of, they were just like this duo. They just fit together really. I mean, yes, of course, during their, 42-year, marriage, they had their issues and things. Will, if we're lucky enough to be with someone for 42 years. And I'll never forget these words because I remember saying to him, well, Dad, I'll probably never be able to be with someone for 42 years. And he said, that's what makes it so hard. And just those words was like him telling me that's what makes it so hard, that she was his lifeline, she was his best friend, she was his wife, cared, just everything you can possibly be for someone. They were for each other.
And grief is dealt with individually. There's no blanket on how it's supposed to look or when it's supposed to end or how we're supposed to handle it, how I handled the loss of my father is vastly different than how you're dealing with the loss of your mother, and it's going to be very different on how he deals with the loss of his wife. And we need the grace in our life to give person the space to do what they are going to do in the time frame they're going to do it. Now, I will tell you, when my grandmother lost her husband, they were married for an extensive period of time, and they were in their 50s when he suddenly died of a heart attack.
Oh no.
And she was 65 before she met the next man in her life. And then they spent 25 years together because she lived to be almost 101. So they waited, they lived together until they're in their 90s. So will he have another 40-year relationship? No. I mean, that's just physically not going to happen.
Right.
But does he have the potential to still have 10 or 15 years with somebody? Absolutely. But he has to get through the process of losing his 40-year best friend.
Yeah.
And if that takes 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it takes, the next potential is still there, but he's not ready to look for that, nor should he.
No,
But he needs to process his
grief.
his
No,
grief in the manner that's best for him. And
you're
as
so
his daughter,
right.
you have the opportunity to give him what he gave you in all those years of your trials and tribulations, the grace to process through it.
Well, and sometimes I think that's hard for him because I'm so much like my mom. And so sometimes I think he appreciates a lot of that. Like sometimes I'll yell at him on purpose, just to like
Yeah.
remind him of her.
Yeah.
Shut up, Dan. Like, kind of like, here's a little piece of home for you. Like,
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, but then I think
Mom
there's
said, be quiet.
like, I think like sometimes he's like, oh my God, but then there are sometimes where I think it almost makes him sad because I remind him so much of my mom. And I'm fully supportive if he meets someone. I don't really see that happening, like something that he wants. But I would like it if maybe like when he's ready, if he could find someone to maybe like go to a movie with once in a
Yeah.
while, like other than me and Charlie.
Yeah. Well, my grandma didn't see it either. I mean, she was off traveling, doing her own thing, and
Yeah.
she met him at a RV park, you know. But that's when love happens, is when we're not
Yep.
looking for it
When
anyway.
we're not looking, that's what happened to
And
me.
so,
So it's
and
like,
I'm not saying that that's what your dad's looking for. I'm just saying,
right.
give him time to process what he's going through now, and give him the grace that you were looking for at that time.
Yep. I'm getting better at it. I promise. Like in the beginning, it was like a cluster, and I'm like, nah.
Yeah. Well,
There's so much.
you're both trying to deal with your own, processing of losing
Mhm.
your best friend, because
Yeah,
she was the best friend to both of you.
she was like, she really was like,
Yeah.
she was my best friend, his best friend, and we both lost him together. And
Yeah.
even my brother, I'll never forget, but like when I got in a fight with my ex, he was like, you better, and my brother's a big dude. And he was like, she just lost her best friend. Like, you better watch it. And I was like, that's true. I did just lose my, like, everything. So it's like, yeah, I need to give him, and I have been. I've been actually, I feel like the last like 4, 5, 6 months has been the best that we've been, because we've kind of like, because I moved home.
Mm.
First it was like temporary, and then I was like, okay, I'm looking at these places, and he was like, well, I would really like it if you wouldn't leave like
Mm.
quite yet. And I was like, ugh. Like, I don't know, but then like it just kind of started like working, and so I'll I'll figure it out. I told my boyfriend, I was like, we might have to get a compound between dad and your parents. Like, we might have to, like, get something where it's like, here's mother-in-law suite 1, here's mother-in-law suite 2,
Communal
which
living again.
I wouldn't care. I really wouldn't care. But it's like, I mean, those are the things that I actually think about now. And I'm not even kidding when I say it, because it might actually happen. Like,
Yeah.
our parents are the same age. Like, his parents are only a few years younger than mine. So it's like, and I've become so close with them, and they've become close with my dad and Charlie. So it's like, yeah, we might all be like living together, but we're gonna have to like get a place where there's, separation.
Gonna have to get a different birth certificate.
Get it? Yeah, exactly. We're gonna have to get a different birth certificate.
The transformation from the grief and from the narcissistic and the abusive relationships into what you're living now, which is more joy and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
If someone who is listening is in a situation that you were in, most didn't grow up in the same bubble that you
Right.
grew up in, so they have a little different spin on it. But what would you say to that person who is in that situation, trying to either recognize it or get out of it? What would you say to them?
If you don't go home and know that the person that you're with is going to be there for you, if you feel unhappy most of the time, and someone is telling you that it's normal to feel unhappy most of the time, it's going to be really hard when you leave for a long time. because you're probably going to be in the same situation I was, where you think that everything was your fault. Because it was your fault. But once you finally, yeah, some things were your fault, like we're all human, but get out. Don't live your life with this person or in this situation where you just feel like you're alone, because sometimes you can feel more alone by yourself, and you're just stopping yourself from meeting the love of your life. And I was lucky enough to get out when I did, and I truly do believe that my mom sent Travis to me. I truly, with all my heart, I believe she sent his whole family to me, not even just him, the whole family. I truly believe that. And it took my mom dying. Oh, she'll never meet him. But I know that she did in some way. So get out. Yeah, get out. Get out when you can. Just make it safe, but make it safe. Make it safe.
Yeah, I think your mom provided what you needed, but you had to heal first in order to be able to be ready for it. My wife and I, we've been together for almost 9 years now, and she often says, I wish we would have met earlier.
Yeah.
And I remind her that we weren't ready for each other earlier. We weren't the good people that we are today for each other earlier. If we'd have met earlier, we wouldn't have lasted, and we wouldn't have been having the future that we're having, because we both needed to heal and mend the wounds that we had and let go of the baggage that we were carrying in order to be ready to be the type of partner we are for each other. So your mom waited until you both, he and you, were in the right place in your heart and in your healing for that meeting to occur.
You're right on point, because Travis has mentioned that too. And he was like, could you imagine? And I was like, I don't think we would have been exact words, almost. And I was like, I don't know if I would have been ready for you, because you're so sweet and you're so nice and you're so the opposite of what I've ever, just being sweet and nice and just always caring about me. I'm like, what do I do with that? I know. But I said, I don't think I would have respected that in the past. I think I would have been like, you're a pushover, like that bores me. Where now I'm like, no, this is what I want for
it's also what you deserve.
We all do.
We don't deserve the people who abuse us and make us feel less than. We deserve the people who champion us, even in our disagreements, have the understanding and the capacity to respectfully hear us, even when they don't agree us, because oftentimes we're not asking for permission, we're asking for support. And if you can't support me in what I'm doing, at least understand why I'm doing it. But if you don't have the capacity to even support our disagreements, then it's not, because we're not always going to see eye to eye. And
no, we're not. And that's something that I'm really lucky to have with my boyfriend now, is he's completely understanding if I'm having, an off day or this or that. Like, we've had one tiff and we're together all the time. And I kind of was like, oh my God, like, kind of like, not like lost, like because of the tiff, but I was like, okay, like this will be that, like he'll be done, because we had like one little tiff or whatever. And he was like, can you just get back over here? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Ever. And it was done before it even started. And we had a rational conversation about it. and it's never been in like anything since. And I'm like, is this how it's supposed to work?
Yeah. If you don't have a tip, then you're being unauthentic, because
Yeah.
you can't agree on every single
No.
thing. And it's
But
funny
we're
because
kind of close. It's kind of close though.
yeah, my wife and I, like, we've laughed now, but I'd say 80% of our arguments have been because of who's trying to out nice the other. Like, we're so used to not having someone do that for us. We get agitated when the other person is just trying to genuinely be kind and do something for us. And it annoys us because oh, I can do it. I can do it. I don't need you to do that, right? It becomes this big thing because we don't know how to handle someone genuinely loving us enough to put us before them. And
Yep.
we both have that stuff that we're still trying to work through. But if you are having a true disagreement and that's what ends you, then all you want is a yes person in your life.
Exactly.
You don't.
And it's kind of funny that you said that about like the nice thing and stuff like that, because when you look at it like the next day or whatever, when you're kind of processing it and everything's worked out, like it's been worked out 10 minutes after it happened, you have to kind of go, if this is our biggest problem, is us trying to be super duper nice to one another when we're disagreeing with one another, I think it's probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because
Respect.
we're not trying to attack each other.
Right.
We're trying to figure out how each other moves forward with disagreements. And the fact that we were both respectful with each other about that says a lot about how we care about the relationship.
Yeah. And it also says how much you care about yourself in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because we deserve to give the same respect that we would like. And I was, for many, many, many years, I was a very angry person, filtered through my own traumas and stuff that I buried instead of healed. And I was very angry. And I look back now that I'm more healed, and I realize how many people I hurt just because I was angry, and how many people I told, oh, this is just who I am, so deal with it. Well, they shouldn't have to deal with my hurt and my trauma. I should have to deal with my hurt and my trauma. And it's not fair to them to just say, oh, well, this is just who I am. Well, that's a cop-out bunch of bullshit.
It is.
Like,
I mean, but I think it's not just you though, Daryl. Like, I feel like pretty much everyone has done that in some sense of their life whether it be work, family, relationship, friendships, or all the above. Like, you're not the only one who has done that. I just feel like you've grown, you've seen what you can become, who you've become, which is a wonderful person. And now you have Elsa, and now you're building that. Now you have 2 children. Yes, they're not biologically yours. Who freaking cares? Like, my boyfriend doesn't have any biological children. He doesn't have any children, that even from past relationships. So, because that can be children too, just like you.
Yep.
And but it's how, like you said, how we grow and how we evolve and how we see ourselves, because I think that's the biggest thing. Like, we have to look in the mirror at the end of the day, right? And go, what did I call? Like, doesn't mean we were always the culprit, but we probably had some sort of, push and pull in there. And so we have to just break the patterns.
Yep. And I think that's when the true healing begins, is when we have the capacity to admit that it is partly us, and we did do something in here.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying that the narcissist and the gaslighter are, correct.
Right. No,
manner,
yeah.
but we have to be mature enough, and maturity happens whether you're 15, 25, 58.
Yeah.
until you can honestly say, I did XYZ and this was wrong, and I'm changing it, then you don't have the maturity to handle any of the other stuff and any of the goodness. And you will always falter and have a bad relationship. And you will go from person to person to person, seeking that outside validation until you fix whatever it is inside you that needs to be fixed and addressed.
Yeah.
And that's when maturity happens, when we can
I
actually take ownership of that.
I agree with you 100%. That is literally something that I have learned. Well, I learned it in the first one too, but then obviously I went to a different, but it was kind of the same pattern, just not the same person. So I had to kind of put that into perspective. And I think because of my age, I was like, I'm running out of time, I better figure this out. Like, like do some hard thinking, hard spiritualization, meditation. Like I tried it all. I was like, I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna travel. I'm gonna go hiking. I'm gonna do things I've never done before. I'm gonna go do this. I'm just gonna do things that I thought I would never do. And it does, like you said, it's part of your growth. Like it's part of, we're just always evolving. And as long as we know it's not, we shouldn't stop evolving. We should just keep going, because it's like I meet people like you who I'm just so blessed to meet, where it's like something happens in your life and I see something in your life and you're like, I'm like, oh, Daryl, everything okay? You see something happen in my life, Danielle, everything okay? Like, that's part of just growing as a person, making sure the people that are around you are okay, making sure that you're okay, so that if someone does need you, you're in the right state of mind to help them, and just grow and build relationships with everyone that you meet.
Well, that's why I think being in a community is important, of individuals who are going to encourage and support you, and be the kind of friend who can call you out on your bullshit, but also the kind of friend who can hug you when you need it and
Yep.
know the difference and know when to apply, when we're, I was interviewing a lady, and she wrote a book, and she said, and her book was about being in Confessions of an Unhappy Housewife.
Oh,
And it was a really insightful book on taking personal accountability and growth. But she realized that part of her problem was that she was hanging around other unhappy housewives, and all they were doing is bitching and complaining about their unhappiness. Well, what do you think that does? It builds more unhappiness. And if you're not in an environment of people who are encouraging you and helping you and leaning in on you, and that you can lean in on them, you're just going to be in this whirlwind of shit. And
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. That's something that my boss and I work on every day. So it's like, if we start, oh, this is happening with this deal, or then we go, okay, rant over, done. What are we going to do to fix it? And so you kind of do have to do that with your friends too. Like you were saying, like with the housewife and things like that. It's like, yeah, when all the girls get to, or even all the guys, same thing, like all the husbands get together or whatever, like, whatever it is that they talk about, then you all get, we all get stuck in this, like we think it's normal. It's not. Every couple is different. Every person is different. We have to do what's best for us and not try to fit in like this norm, because there is no norm.
well, we get in this, going back to the bubble that you were in, but we
Yeah.
get in this bubble of crap where we just believe that it's normal to be unhappy, that it's normal to be miserable, that it's normal to look for the problems, when that is actually not how life is supposed to be. Happy is how normal is supposed to be. Joyful is how normal is supposed to be. Living your passion and your purpose, whatever that looks like, is how normal is supposed to be. And we need to get back to normalizing joy and not misery.
You're so correct, because it was like my ex, like he had his one friend who he's a really nice guy, but he's not, uh he's a very nice person, but kind of like a sheep, you know.
Mhm.
And then the woman who he married, he was with for 8 years, they got married recently. um she's kind of like the you know this, and I'm thinking to myself, oh well, we're normal because we're like you guys. No, this isn't normal. We get along with you people because you're just as unhappy as we are. You're just better at hiding it.
Mhm.
That's not good.
Right.
Like, surround yourself with like happy people, happy couples. And like, of course, if you can help a couple who are unhappy, and maybe you can help them, like, hey, like maybe you guys should go do this or come do this with us, and whatever. Don't get entangled in that. Don't get entangled in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I work with my clients on all the time is we want to move, past our hurts and our traumas, and we want to start living more in our joy and our purpose. And when we can make that our normal, that's a much better life. And we spread that joy and happiness, and then become the light that I see in you all the time now, right? I'm going to ask you one final question. Well, two
Okay.
actually. I'm going to ask you two, because as we head into 2024,
Oh
what
God.
what does the future hold for Danielle at this point?
Oh gosh. Well, obviously continuing my career in the real estate industry and getting my real estate license. So that's really exciting.
Nice.
And then just really concentrating on my dad, my son, my boyfriend, his kid, like our whole family unit,
Mhm.
trying to get better at communicating with my friends.
Mhm.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
And just really honing in on not really focusing like everything on work at the same time, like making sure that everything is, I would like to be better at balancing. That would be the best. Okay, balancing.
Balancing. Well, we'll make
Balance.
that your word for 2024.
Yeah, balancing.
With that balance. And then I'm going to ask you the same final question that I ask every one of my guests. You're in my tribe, you're in my world. It's called a warrior spirit. What does a warrior spirit mean to Danielle?
Anyone who can overcome your own worst fears. That I don't think it's overcoming, it's overcoming what you need to overcome for you, no one else. That would be what I would describe as a warrior, because we all have different things that we've gone through. We cannot speak for one another. We can only just listen to each other. And so whatever it means for that person to overcome, I feel like that's what makes you a warrior.
I
And
love it.
asking for help.
It's a big, yeah, because there's strength in that, not weakness. I think that's
Exactly.
huge.
There's all strength. All of it is strength. Ask for help.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you tonight, and thank you for sharing your journey
Appreciate
and
you
your time
too.
with me. You have a great rest of your week, and thank you so
You
much.
too. Okay, I
All
hope I
righty.
see you soon.
Good night.
Okay, good night. Bye.